Okay, welcome to the second work in progress session of the week. We did a sort of marathon session on Tuesday with a whole bunch of really good tracks, and we're just sort of continuing that flow today. I have a few tracks lined up. I think there's about 7 or 8, so we'll just sort of get started and sort of see how we get on with everything. Let me see if I can find, let me do a quick check to see who is actually on the call. All right. All right, I saw Andrew. Okay, I saw Jay. Wait, let me reorganize this a little bit. I saw Yella, I saw Ross. Nathan. All right. And then probably a couple people will still join us at a later time. Let's just get started. We have Andrew's track first. Let's see if I have some sound, and then yeah, we'll just go and start listening. All right, Andrew, Formula One vibes.
Hey Martin, afternoon. Appreciate you putting me first, by the way. But yeah, so this is my first track I'm submitting to the work in progress so far. So I'm in group 24. Just started last year with this program. To give a little bit of context about the track, a friend of mine had asked me for a track for a VA he's working on, and for a couple of weeks, I really in the hole trying to make this one track. Not this one, but the one before I was working on really perfect, and fell into the trap. I think a lot of people at my skill level fall into, which is where you're sort of doing intense detail work before the idea of the track is fully formed. You know, like flipping through hundreds of samples for kicks to find the perfect kick and stuff. And then when I went to arrange it, I arranged it and it was super flat. And so I got super mad at myself and then made a challenge to myself just to write out something as quickly as possible, like to not sweat the small stuff, just to get something out on the page. And so in this frenzy of frustration, I sort of knocked this out in like 3 days, and then it went through a couple of revisions, and then that's what you're hearing now. But it's obviously like the kick pattern is based on Goem, the South African genre. And there's a bunch of crazy samples and stuff in there, as you heard.
Yes.
So, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to know, did you do this sort of in the studio, or did you do most of the work on the headphones, or what's the sort of setup that you used for this?
My studio setup is not great speaker wise. I have some pretty good studio headphones that I worked with, but I have some like karaoke row kits in my like tiny apartment in Manhattan. The room is like not treated at all or anything. It's pretty dire.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So, because it's funny, like when I sort of listen to it, and obviously we can sort of talk about arrangement, which I think we should do a little bit as well. But the sort of overall sound of the track as is, it's funny because I feel like probably the sort of setup that you use sort of exaggerates this kind of like bassy sound quite a bit, and so you tend to sort of turn it down in your mix. Whereas if I listen to this in my studio, I hear almost no bass. So there is obviously that sort of sub line that you can sort of distinguish, but as far as sort of kick drums, there's almost nothing there. And also when I sort of scan through the track and also look at the analyzer, I don't know if you guys can see the analyzer as well. But so this area here, like between 100 and 300, you know, there's not really a lot of action. And normally that is kind of where your kick drum should sort of start peaking a little bit. And so I think most of the sort of sub information that you have is really low, is like 50 to 60 hertz. And I think what it needs is a little bit of definition so that you don't just feel the bass, but also can hear the bass in the track. So that if you listen to it on a lower volume, it's still distinguishable, you know what I mean? And so I think that's one of the things that I would sort of start working on just when you sort of like re-level the track a little bit, is to sort of make sure that you have like more of this information in this sort of lower mid-range going on. And then also obviously on the sort of higher end of things, you have a lot of like super high pitched percussion going on, which I think is also, you know, it becomes like nice and crispy sounding, but you don't want it to be sort of too sharp, you know? So if I would sort of like very, very quickly like do like a little mix of this, you know, see the kick drum is here, it's like at 100, but it needs to be sort of peaking a lot more to also be audible, you know?
Okay.
See that one. So you have enough sub, but you don't have enough kick drum here. And then also if you look at the sort of top end, between sort of 8K and 20K, there's a lot of like sharpness going on, which you can also sort of fix a little bit in the mix, I guess. See these weird like sort of resonating kind of high notes. But generally that's just mix down stuff, right? So but I just sort of noticed that when I was sort of listening to it, that maybe your sort of situation in the studio, or like the type of headphones that you use, they probably exaggerate certain fields, which makes you turn them down automatically in the mix. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe the other way around too, where maybe some frequencies aren't really represented that well, so you automatically turn them up, to make them sound louder, right? So that's one thing. As far as the sort of track goes, I really like. Obviously, the rhythm is great. I like all the sound effects. I think maybe in the second part of the track, the sound effects feel less deliberate and more random, if that makes sense. I think there's like a little bit of storytelling in the beginning of the track, and I really like this sort of Formula One breakdown, where you have that sort of sound and then it kind of turns into these sort of synth pads, which are really nice. And then I was like, okay, cool. This could be the story of the track, where now it's sort of elevated into a more like synth-led section, But you only sort of repeat that a couple times, and then it sort of goes back to what we had before, right? And so I think maybe, this section right here. See, but then it doesn't build to anything, right? Like it feels like those sort of synths, those washes are really nice, and it feels like there's like some sort of tension being built, and this could go like maybe more over the top, or maybe do something
So
sort of with that sort of synth pad. But then there's
I
no
was
follow up.
actually, just as a quick note, I was actually thinking about putting that in the beginning,
Right.
right? So I mean, another note is like, I just went to Nowadays on Saturday or on Sunday, I guess, and at the nonstop, all the freaks are out in the morning. So I had that in mind while making this, and I think like I got some feedback from some friends that they kind of were sad that that drop, with the risers like happened later in the track.
Hmm.
So I was thinking about putting it in the beginning, but that would like totally flip the storytelling of the track, right? As well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which
So
is, I mean, that's
yeah.
possible. I think this arc is kind of nice, where you sort of
Okay.
introduce the rhythm, you sort of, have all these like little weird synthy bleeps kind of sort of sitting over the top, and they kind of tell a story, right? Like it feels kind of watery as well, which is really nice. And then, that could sort of develop for a couple minutes. I mean, you're not even that far into the track anyway, like 2.5 minutes in. And to then introduce those kind of synth washes would be really nice. But I'm just looking for some sort of follow up, like, how can you sort of go more over the top with those synths, or maybe you have to take something out, like take the drums out and just have those synths play for a little bit and then bring everything back, or like there needs to be sort of a story there, right? So I think, as a sort of 3-day effort, especially sort of born out of frustration, which is usually a really good way to sort of build good tracks, I find. Um, I would definitely sort of finish this, and I think you have like half the story there, but it just needs like a little bit more of a continuation, I think, in this second part, just to like bring it back home, So.
Great. That's great feedback. I guess one last question before I stop hogging screen time is, so I usually work very impressionistically, at least so far. Like I spent a lot of time really thinking about how all the different sounds work together. Are they contrasting each other? What kind of emotional world is this building?
Mhm.
And I feel like I've labored over that less with this track, which is also fine. It's just a style and way of doing things. But I, I find myself like tinkering a lot at a certain point. Like, should I switch this woodblock sound with another sound? Will that make it better? What's your point of view on like knowing when you've reached the concept for the track? Like, when you reach the point of like, this is what the track is about. These are the ideas. Adding more stuff will only take away from that. What does that look like for you?
I mean, most of the time you don't really know, right? Most of the time you just sort of keep developing the track. I think what it's more about is to sort of keep track of the process, right? Like, um, do you sort of if you sort of constantly tinker on stuff, you usually sort of lose track of where you are in the process. Like if you're actually finishing the track, or if you're still sketching, or if you're experimenting, right? And so I think maybe there should be more of a sort of cutoff point where you sort of build the story, you add the sounds, and from then onwards there should be a moment where you're like, okay, now the sort of main idea and the story of the track, I have it down, right? And so now I stop tinkering and I'm just going to work on trying to sort of bring it over the finish line in terms of mix downs. So because you can always change sounds, right? Like um, yeah, you can just keep that doing that forever, but that will never sort of get you to finish music, right? And so I think it's more of a mental thing where you're just like, okay, I have the story down, I've listened to the thing 10, 15 times in a row, and I feel like there is a good arc, there's a good energy in the track. Now I'm just going to see it through till the end, rather than just thinking that this is going to be the track of your life, that you have to
Right.
endlessly sort of tinker with, because that's never going to happen, right? So I think in this case, if I were sort of you at this point, you're like at like 40 to 50%. And I think if you find the right storyline, especially in that second part of the track, that will bring you to 60, 70%. And then you just sort of cut it off and say, okay, now I stop creating and now I start finishing, right? And then from then onwards, you
Okay.
just focus on mixing it and making it sound proper, you know? And I mean, there's always times for other tracks with more wood blocks, right? Like after this is done, you can just move on to the next track. That's the whole point of sort of keeping this flow going, right? Or
Yeah.
bongos, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm Team Woodblock.
yeah, yeah.
Shame on Team Bongos.
So, but you know what I mean? Like, try and find the arc.
Yeah.
Once you have that, I think you're sort of three-quarters of the way there. And then from then, when you feel like you have a good, nice flow, there's enough sounds in here anyway. So, once you have a nice flow, just focus on mixing it and sort of trying to make it sound good.
So like active listening to your own music and saying like, okay, this doesn't suck. There are some things here, you know, let's focus on those and
Yeah,
finish it.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is great feedback and really helpful. Thank you so much.
Cool. Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah.
Nice. And thanks for sending something in, obviously. So, all right. Let's go from Andrew to Jay. Um, Uploading feels cheeky. It's cool if doesn't get played. Would rather someone else get feedback if low on space. All
Well,
right.
yeah, it's literally the pre-master, so
Okay. All right.
I didn't want to
Let's
like,
take a listen.
yeah.
Now I definitely want to hear it. All right. All right. I was a little bit confused because I heard this track before and was investigating it intently for a while, but then forgot about it and then heard it again. So yeah. But Jay, tell me about this.
I don't know where to start.
At the end, I guess, right?
Yeah, like this is it. Like it's basically there. It was like 4 straight days of waking up and then in the morning listening to it, writing down every thought I had about it with a timestamp, and then over the course of the day when I had some free time, like go and make the change. And then eventually it went from like 10 things to 4 to 2, and then the last one was like, ooh, it's a bit spiky at 3,500. I should turn that down. And yeah, it's been, well, I've never gotten this far with the track, so to like have to think about, I don't know, like I got to the point where I thought, okay, I've done the balancing, and okay, now what? Because I've been asked for a pre-master. What the hell's a pre-master? I've got to like look it up. I've got to ask people, and then I do that thing where you like pump it into a limiter or whatever, and I'm suddenly, oh, this sounds terrible. What's wrong with it? The mix is yeah, terrible. What can I do? And so the big challenge for me has been learning how to hear for those problems, because I think I have the tools to solve them. It's just like when do I use it? So I tried to strip all of the tracks back as much as possible. It's like I took all the reverb off and everything and just had it raw, and I thought I could do some rebalancing, and then I'll just, just do EQ and then a bit of compression if it needs it, and keep it as simple as possible. Let's not overcomplicate it. And then over time I was like, ooh, this synth is loud, but only at this point. Maybe I need some dynamic EQ. And then it kind of like, I don't know, I was quite familiar with this track, so it was easy for me to hear those, but it was it's been a very good exercise in like actual production theory for me, I guess.
Yeah. I think, the more sort of used you get to sort of finishing music, the more production becomes kind of like problem solving, right? Like you write the music first, and then, any sort of EQing, compression, all these kind of techniques that initially you always sort of like to just use them for the sake of using them. They become sort of more and more annoying and are really just necessary to solve an issue, right? Like you have an original idea, how are you going to get that idea across to people? And then that's where compression or EQing comes in, or all this kind of stuff, right? But I guess also, first of all, I think that's a really good technique to just sort of listen to the music and, very meticulously go through timestamp by timestamp and just fix the things that you are bothered with in the track. And it not just because it keeps you sort of focused on those fixes, but also there is an end to that list, right? And so once you hit the end of the list, there is just nothing more, unless you obviously start a new list. But you are trying to sort of like work your way to the end of the list. And then once you have that feeling of, okay, I've done all the things that I noticed before, you're basically at the end of it, right? And then you sort of like hit a next stage, which is making a pre-master. And so I think also, like what I heard in your story as well, is that there's way more control over the situation, right? Like when are you making the music, when are you fixing things, and when are you finishing things, right? And that sort of control over the process, I think, is that you only learn that by just making loads of music and finishing lots of music. And so the more you do it, the more in control you are of all of that, So I think that's really, like the sort of main thing to take away from the track, besides it being a great track, So, but it's great work. And like the file looks good, it looks like a pre-master. And so...
I was worried. I was like, okay, well, I know I've solved what problems I think of this. Like, I'm curious, what do you hear?
Yeah. I mean, I always try and sort of make the pre-master sound as close to what I would do in a limited version as possible, except with all that headroom and dynamic, And so then what you get is basically a raw version that you can send to the mastering engineer, and the mastering engineer can do the limiting and the slamming for you. But obviously they do that way more knowledgeable than any of us. And probably also with equipment that's 10 times more expensive than what we have, And so what you do at home will probably, if you sort of get your mastering engineer to do exactly what you do at home, it will just sound way, way better, So, but this looks like something that people can work with, like if you sort of analyze, there's like, there's loads of headroom on the WAV file. So, I think this is way, way better than a limited version if you would send this in,
Yeah, I had like a test chain of like, okay, how would I pump this to like, how should this sound for release? And I abused the file basically, and it came out kind of okay, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah, and if you would A/B, your limited version with the pre-master, except for obviously the volume change, or the loudness. But if it feels like all the elements are kind of in the same place, there's nothing like sort of sticking out, like the pre-master snare is like massive and it's not in the original or whatever, But if it's kind of all in the same ballpark, you're in a good place, Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Nice, cool. Well, thanks for sending. So now everyone got to hear it, which is good. Let's go to Jelle. Yeah, this is more like this is a very different type of WAV file. so let's go and listen to this thing and see what gives. Here we go. right. Jelle, how are you after
I'm
this?
doing well.
I'm worried.
Me too.
Tell me about this.
I'm not sure if I have that much to tell. I made this last summer. Like I was like making almost like a track a day, kind of like a manic writing phase. And yeah, this came out at one point. I like the sounds, I like the concepts. I really don't like the arrangement. Like it feels kind of, I want it to be this kind of surprise or something, like flipping into like this like ethereal kind of thing, like in like all the brutal stuff going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, the composition didn't work. In retrospect, I should have just sent the loop so you could just finish it like last session. Like,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the mix, the like obviously this is unmixed. I don't. This is still very much in the arrangement phase. Like,
yeah. I mean, to me it sounds. To me it sounds like a kind of like stream of consciousness track, right? Where you just start at the beginning and you're just developing and developing without sort of thinking about where it's going to go. And eventually, you sort of take everything to the extreme, which is what you do, and you end up with 6 minutes of this, which is great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But yeah, then there comes a point where you have to sort of unearth kind of a storyline in it. And it's kind of a puzzle sometimes, where you have loads and loads of ideas. I mean, there's like layer upon layer of things happening here. Like there was this one section, I think it was here, and there's like pads and then bass and then the drums over the top. And there was like another pad doing something completely different. I think it was, let me see here.
you just pitched up in the end, I think.
Like just imagine going to the record store and be like, oh, let me check out this record, and then you sort of drop the needle right in the middle and it'd be like, so, but that's fine. Like, that's what we're here for. As far as sort of, if you would sort of have to pinpoint one element in the track that you'd be like, okay, this is what I would like to be the story of the track. Like, if you would play it to someone and people would be remembering the track, what would they sort of identify it as? Do you have like a favorite element in it?
This is the first time I listened to the track again since ages. What kind of now struck my ear was kind of the flip. Well, actually, but that's also the part I like least, but I want it to be about it or something. And maybe that's where it also goes wrong. Yeah, I don't know exactly where it is.
What's your favorite element of the track, like in terms of how you made it?
I like the contrast between the pad and the Hoover. Like I like these two elements.
Okay. So I mean, obviously the Hoover is sort of like a main part of the track, is like in most of the track. And I guess if you would sort of ask a stranger to listen to this music and then, tell you what it's about, they'll probably talk about the Hoover first, right? So I think the Hoovers definitely should be a part of the track. Then you have these pads, and you said that you're really into the contrast of those two things, where one has that more sort of ethereal sound and the other is like brutal, right? And so maybe the way to start arranging is to just build the track with those two things like very separate from each other, and really sort of make these kind of like, for example, you could sort of do like a build up with the Hoover, then just have like a section in the middle where there's absolutely no bass going on whatsoever and it's like purely ethereal, and then the Hoover comes back, these like really like hard flips of what you have in the track, right? So literally sort of skipping through it, you'd have something like this, and then the bass build up, right? and then like these three little bits, you know, if you would sort of have those like in sections next to each other without interfering, then you'd already have more of a narrative than you have now, right? So maybe that's kind of where it needs to start, and then you can always think about how to transition between stuff after that, right? And this is something that I do sometimes when I'm really stuck with a track and I have like no clue what's going on. I just take like 3 or 4 of the best bits, you know, in little loops, and just sort of put those on the timeline like a minute or 45 seconds removed from each other, and just sort of drag them towards each other and sort of build almost like a little anchors, you know. So you build from one anchor to the next, to the next, to the next. And so that then slowly becomes kind of like a story, right? So that could be a good start, you know, just to sort of try not to get bogged down in all these layers immediately, but just sort of keep it super simple of like, okay, ethereal sound, menacing sound, intro and outro. Like if you have those 4 things, you already have more of a story than you have now, you know? Yeah. So maybe that's where you could start. And then once you have like 30 seconds of each vibe, I guess, then you can sort of move them around and see which one should be first and what would happen next. And maybe the bass should return after a while, etc., you know? So maybe that's, yeah, that's the start of the beginning of the puzzle. So,
Great.
I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, that makes sense. Keeping them separate, I think that will be already a big part of the key of the puzzle. And then because I have the feeling it like merges quite quickly in the track, and like to have them come together at the like more later. Yeah. I'm gonna flip things around, strip them down. Yeah.
Usually when you sort of make music sort of stream of consciousness wise, like you can do bits of music and they're sort of ingrained in your mind because you're making it the entire day, right? And so you've been listening to that particular pad or melody or bass line, you know, 7 hours in a row, right? And so for you, you can easily layer stuff because that bass line is so ingrained in your being already that you don't really hear it anymore, right? But for an outsider, when they hear stuff for the first time, they have to process like the bass line, the pads, the, you know, the Hoover, the beats, everything on the top. So it feels like a lot, you know? And so sometimes to just sort of space things out a little bit and kind of make it easier for people to digest, it doesn't really diminish the music at all. Like it doesn't mean that your music becomes simpler, but it just makes the arrangement easier for people to sort of like get hooked into. And I think that's usually the key, right? You can do really weird things, but if your arrangement is super easy to sort of get into, that's when it gets good, you know? So I think maybe that's, yeah, somewhere in that field is like, in that realm is kind of where the answer to this track is. So, but it's intriguing. Like, yeah, there's a lot of good sonic stuff going on. Now it just needs a story, right?
The hardest part.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you so
luck.
much.
So, nice. Oh yeah, a couple good comments in the chat as well about this. All right, let's go to Ross. All right, here we go. Yes, nice. Ross, when? Oh yeah, the release date.
Yeah. So yeah, this one's really close to being done. There's just well, I'm working on a video for it, so I've listened to it like 1,000 times and I still like it a lot, so I take that as a really good sign.
Hmm.
The only thing is the breakdown in the middle, the like kind of siren-y part.
Yeah.
Um, I've struggled with like the sub underneath. Um, it feels a bit static in that part a little bit, maybe. I don't know. I feel like in a live set or in the club or something, it might be a little bit too jarring. I also kind of like that a little bit, but I just think if it's in a set or something, it might be a bit much.
Hmm. Okay. Um, the good stuff is
Mhm.
arrangement is good. Everything happens when it needs to happen.
Yeah.
It's a really nice intro. I really like how it kind of like it doesn't really feel like the track drops, but those sort of like little bass sounds are really clean, and so it's just really really nice when they come in. I have to say something about the bass later as well, but as far as sort of the arrangement, I think it's really nice, and where normally people sort of get caught up a lot in sort of this really like nervous sort of like shimmery kind of sound design stuff that you do as well, um, it's sometimes hard to sort of find like a good groove as well. And that was kind of like for me sort of the problem with minimal techno, for example, right, where
Mhm.
there's so much about the fidgety sounds that after a while there was like no real funk to it anymore. And i
Yeah.
think i think you sort of like tread that line really nicely, where there is obviously loads of ear candy and like little bleeps and bloops and
Mhm.
things going on, but it also still has like a really strong groove, I think. um, and the other thing I wanted to say is also that often when you sort of do a lot of this fidgety stuff, um, it becomes harder to sort of stay interesting for a long time. And so you always need to like contrast it with sounds that are a little bit longer. And I think this is actually where that alarm thing comes in perfectly, because when it sort of comes in, you're like, oh, another sound effect. But then you start to notice that it's actually kind of like a riff that sort of also returns later on in the track. And I think that actually elevates the track so much more than, you know, most of the other tracks that try and do this kind of stuff and just resort in just percussion for 4 minutes, you know? So that's the good stuff. You were sort of worried a little bit about the breakdown, about the bass. So for me, the bass is kind of odd how it sounds, because there's like it's just like a one note, right? But in the bar, it sounds different in different places. So I think either something else pushes it away, or maybe you sort of use different samples or different sounds for it or something like that. But it's not as powerful in the bar in every single bar, if that makes sense. So that was kind of what I was worried about. So maybe I can find it and then we can listen to it again. Let me see. Okay, so this is kind of you know, where it drops, right? And then if you sort of listen to that boom, that sound, it's kind of like, first it's quite clear, and then the second time is sort of pushed away by something, and then the third time is also different. That's clean. Like, it feels like it's not the same everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And initially it was the same. And I'm like, I can't keep hearing this like this.
Okay, so you changed it.
I tried. I did, yeah.
Okay. So because that first note is so strong and so nice, I would sort of prefer to have that same note with the same impact all throughout the track, rather than trying to do different things, because it feels not as powerful in the second and the third time. You know what I mean? So then if you go to the breakdown, so the breakdown is where those sort of alarms start kind of taking over and becomes a riff, right? This is the moment of the track, right? Where I think, and as far as the sort of subs in the breakdown, I think it's kind of nice here. So I do like the sort of variety between that sort of like louder one and the sort of more, you know, compressed one, I guess. I just wouldn't do that in the actual track, and like where there's also beats, you know?
Okay.
But here it's kind of nice. And then, yeah, obviously that sort of switch up where it goes from these sort of alarm sounds and then straight into this really sort of, you know, fidgety section with all the percussion, I think is really nice. Okay. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah, I'm almost there. I feel like I'm past, I'm like at 95%.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you sort of want to talk mixdowns, I think the bass thing, you could sort of sort that out a little bit. Maybe also some of the percussion is a little bit on the sharp end in the top. You know, when I was sort of looking, there's like a lot of like very high end stuff going on. I usually try and sort of clean that up a little bit. Usually it's just like one instrument that just has like it's just peaking a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
So, but apart from that, I mean, yeah, like I could play this easily. It's nice.
Okay, cool. So, nice.
And I like how it's sort of, you know, it's like nicely swung as well as sort of fidgety, you know? So I think it's a really nice mix of things. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Nice. And some good comments as well. Except for
yeah, thanks guys.
Yellow with his
a lot of good
0.1 dB. Yeah. All right. Good stuff. Let's go to Tancredi. Let's see. All right. Let's have a listen. All right. How are you?
I'm good, you?
Pretty good. Hanging in there. Tell me about this.
So I was listening to a lot of Omnidisc releases lately.
Yep.
Especially there's the Azari album, Aqua Tetra, that I was really inspired by.
Yep.
So yeah, if you guys know, the Omnidisc is the Danny Days' label, and it's a big inspiration for me. Anyways, I just decided to do something real quick. This took me like 40 minutes to do, and feels like it's like a first sketch, and I feel like most of the elements are here, but it's mostly about the transitions between the sections of the track that I'm kind of confused about.
Mhm.
It's the first time I'm kind of mixing some like more experimental sounds with electro, which I am really into it lately. So yeah, I was kind of curious to know what you guys thought about it.
Cool. Okay. Um, I was sort of going through the track, and then I had my opinion, and then going through the track more and more, I changed my opinion. So I'm gonna give you my changed version. So first of all, the really good stuff. You know, the track is it sounds great. Like, you know, this is a really good idea, I think, and I like the sort of talking to aliens vibe. You know, the melodies are really nice. But obviously, like you said, you know, it's more about the moment, right? It's like when sort of elements are changing, that's usually where the sort of magic is in these kind of tracks, right? And so even in the beginning, you know, I always have this rule when I'm sort of making arrangements that I always want to add or remove two or more things at the same time, right? Because that gives you like a sort of a switch element that sort of creates excitement, whether you take stuff away or if you add stuff, right? And just this one section in the beginning with the kind of the drop, I guess, with the intro, and then immediately drums and the pads at the same time immediately gives you like a sort of power move almost to sort of get you into the track, right? It just immediately kind of sets like a mood, and I think that's really, really powerful. And I think if you find sort of 3 or 4 of those moments in over the course of the entire track, then you're in a really good place, you know. And then the second thing that I was sort of thinking about is that you need to sort of nail the pacing of it, right? Because not just do you have to find those moments, but you also have to sort of place them in exactly the right time, like when do they need to happen? And when I was sort of going through the track, you know, this kind of cycles a little bit with the with these pads, and then it becomes more sort of bleepy here. And then I sliced it here because when I listened to this part, I was like, okay, now is time for another power move. Like now something needs to switch, right? And so that didn't quite happen, but it happened just a little bit too late. So I think, you know, if you would sort of take out this section and then come into this, right? So from here, then this can cycle for a little bit,
Yeah.
you know, you can sort of develop it a little bit. So this could be way longer as well. Let me see. You know, you make this like twice as long at least. Right, something like that. Then you have a breakdown. And then go back into sort of straight bleep territory, which is, oh yeah, with the bass line, that could be nice. So maybe after that breakdown, you could have the bass line come in. Bass line could be a bit louder too, so that it really sort of becomes a new element in the track, right? Then maybe like repeat this section but without the pads, right? So you have like a little bit of variety. So suppose this would be like a padless version, and then you go back to that sort of straight bleep section, which was here, I think. Let me see. Okay, so then back to that. twice as long, and then you're in a different place now, right? So okay, so very, very roughly, so the storyline of the track, if you sort of get the pacing right, would be something like this. So intro, then the drop where you introduce the pads, that cycles for a little while, then you take out the pads, then bring it back, pads come back, then the bass line, I think. Then the same section, but imagine there's no pads. And then back into bleep. Right now it feels like there's like an arc, right? Like there's like a little bit of a story. So I think maybe, obviously you haven't sort of spent that much time on the track yet. So I think that the way to sort of like rebuild this, or like the way you want it, would be to just listen to the track from the beginning every time, from start to finish. And anytime you feel like, okay, now is when I want something new, is when you build these switches, right? And so in the beginning, you just do that very roughly and just sort of copy paste all these blocks, so that everything sort of sits in the right place. And then once you have that, you can sort of fine tune it, make transitions, sort of see what, some volume changes or whatever, but just try and sort of keep listening from the beginning all the way to the end, and just keep making adjustments that way, right?
Yeah,
that's how I
sense.
would sort of try and do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. And I think, like, it's funny because the track feels kind of dreamy. So I think people almost automatically want to make the arrangement also very dreamy, where everything like develops very slowly and everything needs to be smooth, And I think it's probably way stronger if you keep the arrangement quite basic and sort of quite blocky, where stuff just drops in and out, because it just makes the sort of the dreamier elements work much better, I think, than when it's just like this sort of flowy 10-minute epic, you know what I mean? So I think that
it's
would
like
be
a contrast, to the dreaminess of it,
Exactly. Yeah, like maybe, like treat it like an electro track, like
Okay.
treat it like where you have all these like really powerful switches once every while, but just do it with these kind of more dreamy elements. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Let's go to, let me see. Nathan is here, right? Yeah. All right, let's listen to Nathan's track. Nathan, I have thoughts, but
Yes,
you go
please.
first.
Yeah, no, here for all the thoughts. Yeah, so I wanted to make a dubstep track, obviously, and I haven't really dabbled in dubstep that much. But yeah, kind of wanted to make just like this atmospheric, like murky dubstep track, and I'm like really inspired by kind of like the psychedelic, like deep bass scene that's like really prominent in like France and Australia right now. So very like very sound design forward. Which, you know, on that note, like I think where I'm at with this track right now in terms of kind of self-critique is like it still feels, I mean, the arrangement needs a lot of work, I think, and I'm kind of like I submitted this track knowing that like it was kind of at a point where I kind of just threw like the kitchen sink at it, like just I have like an idea that kind of just like lands and like oh, hey, not now, sorry. Um, so I think I know a point where like the idea that I want to like stick more lands and that I should like go back and repeat that and like kind of work on it more. But right now it's at a point where I think I kind of introduced like new but somewhat related elements like further in the track and it kind of just like crescendos and then drops out and then the track ends, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think I probably need the most like tightening up in that spot. But it was a lot of fun to make. I enjoy listening back to it. And also I'm also wondering, since it is a dubstep track, and I was like listening back to it just now, I was like, oh, there's like no snare in it. Like, does it need a snare to like kind of like make it pop more?
Right.
But yeah, so that's where I'm at with it.
Um, I wouldn't worry about whether what genre the track is in and just sort of make the track the way you want to make it first, you know?
Yeah.
What is your favorite part of the track?
I think you actually might have marked like the first kind of split in the region is like when that I guess like when the first like synth comes in, that kind of like that kind of beepy, alarmy sounding synth. Yeah, I think right there, yeah.
This is the bass, right? Right, where the
Or
bass
maybe
sort
a
of
little
comes in, and then this one is where that sort of little synth
yeah,
comes in.
yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's your favorite part.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So, um, I think when people sort of listen to the track, or when I'm listening to the track, I'm always looking for some sort of anchor, right? And
Mhm.
with anchor, I mean sort of rhythmically, you know, when you sort of create beats that are sort of like a little bit broken, or they're like a sort of weird pattern that is not very usual, you know, or you have like bass stabs that are sitting in weird places in the bar, right? People are always kind of looking for that one element that they can sort of latch onto, whether it's on the dance floor or when they're sort of listening to stuff. And, you
Mhm.
know, when you said, you know, maybe it needs a snare, it's not because there needs to be a snare in the track, but it's because that would sort of be one of those elements that would sort of always happen at the same time, so that people's brains can kind of be like, oh, this is the rhythm, like this is the pacing, this is how I'm supposed to move to this, right?
Mhm.
And so when
Mhm.
that's absent, it can still be great, but it just becomes this kind of like more disjointed kind of sound. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so,
Right.
for example, in the beginning, when you sort of listen to the track, if you would sort of drop the needle right in the middle here, and you would sort of listen to this, like there's loads of rhythmic stuff going on, but it's almost, well, not impossible, but it's kind of hard for people that sort of listen to it for the first time to be like, oh, okay, that's the one, this is how I'm supposed to move, you know. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
is really funny, because if you want to try and sort of build a like a kind of like a rhythmical anchor like that, without using very obvious sort of percussive sounds or snare or kick drum, right? Then it has to rely on the melodic elements that you use, right? Because you can do rhythmic stuff with melody, right? And I think the moment where you sort of identified of like, this is my favorite moment, is when there is a melodic element coming in, but it actually functions as a rhythmic element, because the repetition of it makes you kind of latch on to that sort of like, oh, this is the one, this is the groove. You know what I mean? So if you listen to this part again, see, now when you're in the warehouse and you just hear boom, bam, bam, boom, bam, bam, you know where you are, right? Like that's almost like the anchor to the track. And so when you start to arrange this properly, that's important to sort of think about, like, okay, if you're not doing it with, you know, the obvious sounds, you want to sort of make sure that the melody functions as that kind of anchor in the track, right? And I think most people that were sort of listening to this probably also found that this section is really interesting, and it's for the same reason, because also the synths now have this really rhythmic sort of element, and this is where the track actually starts like properly grooving without snares, right? See, but it's all about the melodies that are sort of dictating the rhythm. It almost feels like the drums are just like, I don't know, doing something else, you know, just for fun. So, but that's important. So if you want to arrange the track properly, you want to rely on sort of the melodies doing the rhythmic work, then that's something that you could sort of think about. So suppose we'll just rewind, and you know, you have an intro, you know, where you sort of bring in the sort of vibes and the sort of deeper, darker elements. You want to sort of introduce that rhythmic thing, you know, that sort of like gives people a pacing, right? So maybe, for example, the melody that you sort of introduce here, you know, maybe you can do like a filtered or lighter version of that in the intro, so that people already have that thing that they can latch onto, right? And so that could be nice, you know, to sort of start off that way. Then maybe bring in that sort of Reese bass that you have in the beginning. Because it's kind of sad that that one's kind of like lost in the end of the track. Like it is really nice. So maybe you could also save, you know, like bring it in the beginning and then sort of bring it back in the end, you know. That could be really nice to sort of build more structure. And then I think the golden sort of section is really this sort of progression right here, you know, with that sort of higher pitched synth that's really sort of starting to do the work here, you know, like the way it sort of like goes a little bit over the top. I think that should be the main section of the track, like this. All this goodness. And that other synth takes over, makes it even more rhythmic, because you have like a sort of double tone. See, that's all great. Like this should be in the middle of the track, you know? So I think that's maybe how you could like slowly start to rearrange it a little bit, based on the idea that sort of the rhythms or the melodies are kind of dictating what the rhythm of the track is, rather than the drums.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, that's super helpful. I think like I mean the way that it's sitting right now, it kind of feels like, I think I said it before, it's like this kind of really gradual like crescendo to like that point that is like this kind of long-awaited like climax of the track. And then by the time it happens, like it's already like 4 minutes into the track. Whereas like all the stuff before was kind of just like trying to like figure out the way there. But I think like it makes a lot of sense to like take like, you know, the most like affecting part of the track and like move it earlier, and just like kind of rearrange the building blocks.
Yeah. And I mean, not that you have to think about DJing or about sort of playing stuff live, you know, but oftentimes if you sort of move a lot of that sort of crescendo type stuff towards the end of the track, you run the risk that people will sort of like start mixing in other tracks, and you kind of lose that entire tension build that you have.
Right.
While if you sort of move it a little bit more to the front, where maybe if you would listen to the track separately, you'd be like, it feels a little bit early, but in terms of sort of having it sit in a mix, for example, or as part of a live set or whatever, it will make more sense to have the sort of action of the track sort of more move towards the middle rather than towards the end, So sometimes it's nicer to almost like exaggerate the intro a little bit, like go a little bit too fast almost, sort of develop too fast, so you get to the meat of the track in the middle, and then sort of use the outro just to sort of like vibe out a little bit,
Yeah, totally.
But I think, especially because like I said, like the synths are like the rhythm, and, they dictate the rhythm. And so, to have that sort of almost driving kind of thing right in the middle would be really nice,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Thank you.
But yeah, like sound design is ace. Sounds great, but I think, try and sort of lean into the rhythmic aspects of it. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Cool. Nice. This is great. This track was great. Okay, let's go to, let me see. I saw Addison here. I think this is the last one, maybe. All right, let's listen to Addison's track. right. Addison, how are you?
I'm unmuted.
Oh,
Hello.
now I hear you. Just
Okay.
a bit quiet.
I don't know if I can fix that. Let me just talk louder. I'm doing good. Thanks.
So tell me about the track.
So, for this one, to be honest, it's a very old one that I revisited, that I had sitting around. I can't remember how it started, really. Probably with the drums, and I just kind of like the halftime. I guess it's technically 140, but obviously the drums are the halftime feeling. And I kind of had the bass and those stabs were probably the first elements. Just playing with like having them playing off the drums. And then I had the vocals, and then it was sitting gathering dust for a while, and then I went back and chopped them up and struggled with how to arrange this. So I saw some good ideas already about the arrangement. I tried to go with like the vocals just from random sample pack.
Okay, cool.
So
you can use them. It's not like a...
Yeah, I can use them, yes.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. That's good.
I think.
Nice. All right.
Yeah, and so then I'll just really quick, I just tried to do like a basic pop song arrangement, like have because I'd never really done that before intentionally, I guess. So I tried to just do like a verse, chorus kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that came across, but that was the idea.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Track is great. Bass sounds are really good. Like it sounds really fat, which just very, very, I don't know. Is it like
Nice.
some sort of synth that you use, or is it like a soft synth, or do you remember?
It's a mixture.
Okay.
Some of it is from Josie Devil's sample pack, I think.
Okay.
So if people don't have that, it's a really good one. So it's just some samples, and then other one, and then there's some serum patches, I think.
Right. Cool.
So there might be like four different sounds in there, but
Nice.
I kind of move them around so it sounds cohesive, hopefully.
Yeah. I love the bass. I think on the beat side of things, if you want to sort of go a little bit in the trenches with it, like a lot of it, like the kick drum and snare drum are like a little bit on the thin side, which maybe is good for this poppier approach. But also like it started to bother me a little bit about the snare, that it was kind of thin, that I wanted like a little bit more body or like a little bit more punch maybe and I wouldn't necessarily find a different snare sound, but just find something that you can put underneath it,
Yeah,
just to
because
sort of
right
fan
now,
it.
that's a good point. Yeah, it's only the one sample, I think.
Yeah, like even
So
if you would
it's
just
not
take
very
say a regular boring 808 snare or something like that and sort of pitch it to the right,
Yeah.
to sort of tune it exactly to this snare and just layer it underneath, so it has like a little bit more on that sort of like 500 to 1000 hertz type vibe, I think it'll be nice and punchy. So that's one thing. I was kind of like going through the arrangement a little bit. I think there's like a breakdown. I think it's a little bit too soon. So basically, let me see, where are we in the track? So I'm just going to sort of cycle through it real quick just to get a feel for it. So there's kind of like a big drop, right? So that's kind of like your verse, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So the verse happens, and then I think at 57, so what is that, 153, there's kind of like a breakdown starting, and then that breakdown sort of cycles through to the sort of second verse, I guess. So that happens here. So I love this section, but I think it comes a little bit too early. Like maybe you need to extend it by, you know, maybe just 20 seconds or something, just to sort of like delay this moment a little bit more. Because this is kind of like the sort of main section of the track, right? Where it's sort of like all kind of like vocally sort of like explodes in a way. So I would sort of try and sort of, yeah, like delay that a little bit in the pacing of the track, and then sort of go back to, which is kind of like your back to zero point, right? Where you're sort of back in your original groove. And it's nice how you sort of build it up again, because, you know, you have the sort of main bass line and the drums again, and then the vocals are kind of more like snippets here. So I don't know if you want to go back to the sort of full vocal again, or if you maybe just roll it out that way, right? Where it's just sort of more groove and more sort of like an outro almost. So that was kind of where I was at with the track. So yeah, so big breakdown. Sorry, here. Then to this sort of more sparse part. Then a variation with those vocal snippets. Then the same thing, but with the double drums. And then outro. I think you're nearly there. I think, yeah, like the middle section, the pacing is just a little bit off, I feel like. But, you know, if you want to do banger, it needs to be perfect. You know?
That's the hope. It's the dream.
Yeah.
But
But I
like,
think you're really close. I think you are really close. It just, yeah, like I said, maybe in that sort of middle section, like that needs a little bit of fine tuning to sort of nail it, you know?
Were you suggesting in the main, for the drop after the main breakdown, for to go to, instead of going into that main one, go to the other section first?
I think that could be really cool.
Understand that.
Yeah, because just for the same reason that we sort of discussed earlier on in the session too, right? Like always try and sort of do these kind of like power moves in the track where there's like a moment where people just get excited again about the track, right? So I think that could be really nice to just go from that sort of vocally, you know, extravaganza breakdown straight into this really sparse kind of like cool, you know, super tight sounding vocal snippet thing, you know? That could be good. Like this. I like this. Like that. I think that would be really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
A few grand on the right PR company and it will take over the world. Yeah. That's what I'm doing, Scott.
Thank you, Scott, but I appreciate it. I also like, Scott also mentioned, I was kind of thinking that too, that maybe the first part needs a break between the vocals. Maybe that's a way to delay that breakdown a little bit. It's just in there somewhere.
I think
a little bit.
it was just around where that first snippet was, I think, like maybe just before that, but equally you don't want to do like a big massive long break either with it being poppy, right? You want like you
Yeah.
can still do like a relatively short break, even with like some tiny little vocal snippets. But it just went from like fast rhythmic vocal into another fast rhythmic vocal
Yeah.
quite quickly, and it was a little bit kind of yeah.
Or you also, you know, if you're worried about too much vocals or too many vocals sort of all throughout the track, you know, another rule is, you know, to always take stuff away, right, to sort of create this dynamic. So even if, you know, for example, that little breakdown here where it starts filtering, where is that here? Yeah. See, maybe the filtering is just not enough to sort of create that dynamic change, you know? But
Yeah.
for example, even if you put like a 4/4 bit there, like 8/4/4 kicks, and then back to the half step thing, that would be a much more functional way of sort of just breaking with that sort of
Breaking it.
vibe and then bringing it back, you know? Not saying that you should turn it into 4/4, right? But like something really basic and simple. Maybe the filtering is just a little bit too subtle to actually make an impact, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Or I think only the drums were getting filtered there too, probably.
Yeah, yeah,
So I could try to filter my vocals too in the same
yeah.
way. Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Do you have enough to work with, you think?
I
Maybe
think
too
so,
much. So,
No, it's okay.
too many ideas also not always good. So just yeah, like I said, just keep
Yeah,
it simple.
I
you
have
know?
I have many more ideas that are all on the side of the project. So
Yeah, yeah,
it was the core idea was pretty quick, but then I had so many variations trying to like figure out how I want to do the chops and stuff. But
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's all about pacing and just making these kind of like, you know, dynamic moments in the track, you know, and doing them at the right time. So yeah, just keep listening to the track from beginning to end. Like that's really, really important because you almost start to feel where the changes should be, and that's always where you feel that's always where they are, you know.
yeah.
So okay, all right. We did a whole bunch. That's good. And yeah, quality of the tracks is just pretty amazing. So I'll upload the recording so you guys can watch it back. I'll also save the chat, and then you know, we can you can always sort of revisit all the comments. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. That was a very good session. Also, yeah, Scott and me will announce some more peer sessions as well soon, which are like work in progress sessions without me yapping. So that's basically what it is. We'll announce a couple of those as well. So any of these tracks you can always sort of start developing there as well. And yeah, also upload stuff in the work in progress folder in Discord. And I can always take another listen and give you some more feedback there as well. So yeah, I think that's all from me. All right. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.